Welcome to Scene at the Academy. I'm Pete Hammond, and here I have three great artists here to talk about the movie Living, one particular scene, but also the whole movie here. At any rate, I want to welcome Bill Nighy, the star of Living, Oliver Hermanus, the director right here, and a Nobel and Booker Prize winner and such a distinguished career, Kazuo Ishiguro, who wrote the screenplay here. And let's start about this. Obviously, is a remake, an English language remake of Kurosawa's Ikuro. And tell me how it came about. Was this something that you came up with, or how did the idea to remake this and actually set it in the same era that the original was set in, 1952, 53?
For many years, I'd had this idea. It was an ambition of mine, not to participate in it, but to actually see somebody do a beautiful English version of Kurosawa's Ikiru. Ikiru was a very important movie for me from when I was about 10, 11, 12. I watched it whenever I could, and I think it became almost like an obsession as I was growing up, the message that it had about how you approach life. But it's only about 15 years ago that I started to think it would be wonderful if somebody would actually use that material, but also marry it with a whole bunch of stuff about Englishness and a kind of England that had kind of vanished, sometime after the Second World War. But nevertheless, it represented something that's still universal about human nature. And so that was my initial impulse. Things only really clicked for me when I had this kind of epiphany moment. I thought, if Bill Nighy, I didn't know Bill at this point, if Bill Nighy could do it, it would actually be perfect. It would be the gateway into this kind of Englishness.
Now let's set up the story here a little bit to lead into the scene that we're examining as part of the Scene at the Academy. Of course, he finds out, Mr. Williams, that he's going to die within 6 months. He has lived the same life for 20 years since his wife died. Everything has been the same routine. Suddenly, the title of the movie comes into play here.
The important thing about this film is that although it is about somebody who gets a very gloomy diagnosis, that it's actually a film about not about dying. It is about living.
Right.
You know, in a way, the death sentence from cancer is a kind of MacGuffin, if you like. I think it's actually possible to do this movie without the diagnosis. I mean, you just need something that makes that question very urgent. So what is actually important in life? You know, if you've only got a limited amount of time, and the horrible truth is, we've all of us only got a limited amount of time. We all think we're going to live forever, but actually, you know, we've all been given some sort of death sentence by our condition, that we're human. So you know, how do you make your life meaningful? How do you gain some sense of satisfaction? Why the original Kurosawa meant so much to me, and why I wanted, you know, our movie to say something very strongly about this question, was that I think it is actually subtly and crucially different to the message of, say, A Christmas Carol, or It's a Wonderful Life. You know, these kinds of stories try and provide an answer to that question. You either completely change yourself from being this kind of bad person to a wonderful person overnight, and then your life becomes meaningful, or you might think your life is pathetic, but actually you don't realize that you're inadvertently doing wonderful things to all the people around you. These are the two kind of messages those movies give, and there are long traditions that come out of them. Ikiru says something else different. It said, you know, you can have a tiny life, a very humble, humdrum life, but just with a little bit of an effort, you can tip that from being this kind of shell of a life to something quite magnificent and heroic. You can just stay the person you are. You can just play the hand that life has dealt you. So for me, that's why this film is called Living. It's a celebratory film about a guy who's dying.
And we see that in this scene here, which goes to the seaside outside of London, and he goes out there, and there's exotic dancers and stuff going on, and he meets this guy, Sutherland, played by Tom Burke. Yes. And tell us about that and why that scene was so important, and the way you filmed it too, because it's quite dark in a lot of ways too, as we see him emerge from almost the darkness, I noticed with the cinematography.
Yes. The idea of Sutherland was that he was going to be this man of a younger generation, just like one generation down from Williams, who had just lived his life on a different track. He had lived his life kind of just not doing the things that Williams had done, the sort of servitude that Williams demonstrates as a man. And it just sort of never really married, never really had anyone to worry about but himself. You know, really traveled most of Europe, had a life full of sort of decadence and self-interest. And so this man is a man of the place and time. And Williams, Bill's character, has assumed, this is his first assumption with the knowledge of his own death, that he's going to just sort of take all his money, take it out of the bank, he's going to go to the coast, and he's going to have what he imagines to be fun. But he doesn't really know what fun is. He's never, as he says to Sutherland, like, I don't know how. And he's just lucked out meeting this man who, if you've got some money and free time, he's the guy you want to, go out with. And he sort of tries different things with Williams, takes him around to all these little haunts. But by the time we get to this particular scene, Sutherland is getting a little bit desperate to sort of find something to really keep Williams interested. And he's already really passed out. He's so tired, probably just had too much to drink. And then there's this pang, death arrives, death comes knocking, and it's the first time we really see that with Williams. And he has to run outside. And then there's this moment of truth between them, which is completely unspoken. And I really wanted Bill to emerge from the dark, although I kept sending me further and further back. I remember I said, keep going, Bill, keep going.
I love that. I thought that was a really effective
you had to be beyond the lights. And then, because I wanted him to come out of the dark, this sort of real tonal change. And Bill does it so extraordinarily, because it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was really cold, and Bill you could just read everything on his face. And having Tom was just he's one of Bill's good friends, and it was just a lovely moment between them, with Tom just sort of being the perfect person who could he takes his hat off because it's sort of he gets it. He reads the moment. There needs to be this moment of respect that a man's life. This is mortality that they're facing together, and the night is definitely done.
Yeah, but that's so key, and that's so key for you as an actor getting into this character, that moment, I would imagine, too.
Yes, and I remember that Tom, after he'd taken the role, he said that there were many reasons why he wanted to be in the movie, but one of the reasons was this scene. In fact, that beat, that moment, he'd identified that as a key moment for him. As Oliver says, Williams has never had he's heard about this thing called a good time. You know what I mean? And he goes, and I find it very moving that he goes to Brighton. Brighton, it's a sort of period, it's where you went to have a good time, So you went to the coast. I'm sure there are equivalents in every country, but yeah, quite.
Yeah.
But
Las Vegas.
yeah, exactly. It's like he went to Vegas. I'm going to die in Vegas. Except it's Brighton, which is even sadder. But, no disrespect to Las Vegas. But yeah, so, and he sees this guy who he thinks maybe he looks like a guy who knows what a good time is. It's very moving that he shows him the money and says, all this cash, and says, would you help me spend this money? I mean, it's an incredibly reckless, innocent kind of thing to ask somebody that you don't know in a cafe.
And that's the key motivation when he goes back to London, and suddenly, you brought up Christmas Carol. It's suddenly like, he's never Scrooge. The character is not that, but suddenly, it's a different person. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you can look at it that he's had this shock of having this diagnosis, so he kind of auditions the obvious answers to how do you kind of live your life to the full in the time you've got. And so the scene we're talking about is the moment hedonism kind of fails the audition. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he kind of rejects it in a flippant or even an angry way. And this is what I like about the interplay between Bill and Tom Burke. There's real respect. I mean, and that's there in the original Kurosawa as well. A lesser film than Ikiru would have actually made the Tom Burke character somebody nastier or much more louche, much more repulsive, so that it's easier for in our case, the Williams character to reject the person who represents the hedonistic solution. But no, the Tom Burke character is very subtle and very decent. And they do form a kind of friendship. And I feel in that moment when they look at each other, they understand something of each other's predicament. There's a kind of camaraderie and understanding. I like the way Bill, I mean, I don't know if it was your idea or Bill's idea, but when he emerges out of the dark, he taps Tom Burke on the shoulder almost reassuringly. It's almost to say, one day you'll be in my position as well. We're all in this together. Because that is the moment when Tom Burke not only realizes that Williams is dying, but that death is real. I mean, the reality of death it really hits him for the first time, and they're in something together. So, the way you directed it, where you played it, I think it just makes it a much more rich scene than I tried hedonism, it doesn't work. I have to look for something else. I mean, it's much deeper than that.
It was on the page, on your page, but what he brought to it, and your cinematographer.
Of course.
Jamie
Ramsey, of course, yes.
Yes.
I mean, we worked really closely together, and we discussed that scene quite a lot because it was this fun idea of having this tent with loads of happiness kind of all around, particularly the inside of the tent, lots of warm lighting. This is really fun time for people, and having there were these lights outside above Tom's head as well. So this challenge of lighting something that is the sort of womb of happiness on the seaside, and then having to sort of bring Bull out of the dark. And I added this sort of droning sound of the ocean as well, this sort of repetitive sound, and it all goes very quiet. I think it's just it's like an amazing opportunity for me as a director when you work with two actors who can do a scene and there's zero dialogue, but there's such clear beats in what they're doing. There's a level of communication going on, like Tom noticing something's wrong, seeing Bull's hand, Bull hiding his hand, that reaction to that, Tom taking off his hat, Bill then deciding that he's going to go back inside, and how he touches Tom. You know, that's communication, and you know, it was just, I mean, honestly, I just put the camera there, and Jamie put the lights there, and we just kind of watched them do it.
Well, it's remarkable. It's remarkable in the context of the movie Living, too. So I hope if you haven't seen it yet, this will encourage you to. I bet it does. And if you have seen it, it's so great to hear how it all turned out and the movie. So thank you all for joining us at Scene at the Academy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.